Welcome back, friends, to Role-Playing Unlimited Out of Character. We are here again tonight with another hour of discussions about this past week's Baldur's Gate Descent into Avernus session. We have with us Salathiel, the Aasimar Paladin, played by Evil Dawn there in the central frame. And bringing up the bottom frame there, we have Justin, who portrays Nadir, our Tiefling Sorcerer. And I, of course, am Tragically HP, Dungeon Master, and General GM Creator, yada yada. We're going to jump right into where we left off at the end of last session, where your characters were taking a short rest, in some cases a badly needed short rest, especially for Salathiel, who keeps finding himself smashed and bashed in pretty much every combat that we delve into. I tend to think that's because of Salathiel's insistence on opening the door, and that tends to make him the first target, although the fact that we have party members sometimes giving away our advantage of surprise is not helping matters, but we will certainly get into that here shortly. Despite the fact that we had a wandering monster encounter interrupt our short rest, it wasn't much of an affair at all. I think Ben rolled lowest on the initiative, and he didn't even get to act in that combat. So quick were your characters to respond to the two cultists and the imp. What were your impressions and thoughts going into that and coming out of that combat?
Well, I mean, I kind of figure, with the interrupt in the short rest and, a bunch of us had like very few hit points left, I thought we were going to get creamed. But then it's like we had the opportunity to get a strategic position, and, in any sort of game, be it Dungeons and Dragons or a board game or anything like that, strategy is the key. So the fact that we had an opportunity to set up a little bit so that we reduced the amount of, even though it's two of them, we kept them out in the hallway, we kept the room to ourselves, we had more opportunities to attack them.
Yes, of course, it always helps that the dice did us well at that point.
Oh, for sure. And
I hit stuff.
That segues right into my next point right there. After we completed this wandering monster encounter, your characters leveled up to 4, but spoiler alert for those of you who didn't catch the session on this past Tuesday, I watched it. Don, you did not miss one attack roll the entire night. I just kept watching. I didn't want to say anything at the time because I was like, I'm going to jinx it. And he's going to go right back to his 1s and 3s and 5s and what have you. But sure enough, I was like, all right, finally the dice turned. Almost in one session, it kind of evened out, I think, on the whole, everything that's been negative about Salathiel's dice thus far.
And the only real difference was going up to level 4, I was able to increase my strength by 2, which gave me an extra +1 to hit, Yeah, and then we found that mace later, which we'll talk about. That helps out.
Oh, definitely. What, do you have a different impression of your character or the paladin archetype in general after a complete 180 as far as the dice and the tactics go, or are you still leaning towards the character classes in need of some revisions?
I still think, because, there's a lot of abilities that take an action. So it eliminates the ability to swing my weapon at a creature, so I can't heal myself quickly and then hit the creature. And since I'm a frontline fighter, the ability to heal, 5, 10, 15 hit points while you're up in the front line is crucial. If I have to be on the front line and all of a sudden I have to completely stop to heal 15 hit points for the creature to hit me for 15 hit points the next round, it's sort of, it wastes a round, in my opinion. If I was able to give myself 15 hit points and then deal damage, it would make more sense.
Yeah, at what point does too much healing Or at what point is X amount of healing too much for a bonus action, though? Because I know that's kind of the balance point between other classes. Is even the cleric and what have you, they might have bonus action healing abilities, but I think the cap on it is at least somewhat limited. So I don't know. I didn't design the game, so I still don't know all the ins and outs of how everything balances. I'm pretty pleased with the system overall in the years we've been playing it, especially compared to the cacophony of chaos, as I like to refer to it. That is 3.5.
Well, you have a lot of classes that get bonus actions and they do a lot more damage.
Yeah.
Paladins have very few, if any, bonus actions. We do have the smite as a bonus action, but that's also limited by spell slot.
Yeah, it's definitely a choose one or the other, but then considering your character has the regain spell slots ability, it kind of allows you to at least feel those fires a little bit longer, so to speak.
Yeah, and the good thing is it gives me the opportunity to get one spell slot back at a short or a long rest because it uses my divinity. But the thing is that I have 3 divinity powers and I have 1 divinity usage between short rests. So again, it's a balance game. Do I use it for getting that 1 spell slot back so I could get an extra smite, or I could get possibly a cure light wound spell off? Or do I use it for the turn fiend ability? Because I have the Watcher, the Oath of the Watcher. So I could turn Celestials, Fiends, and things like that the same way as a cleric would turn undead.
Well, I hear you explaining a plethora of options that you have on any given turn depending on the enemies you face, and it sounds like that's a good problem, I think.
Well, the turn undead is a full action, which it should be. I mean, granted, that is a powerful ability to turn the undead
or destroy them outright.
The third ability that the Watcher gets at 3rd level for his divinity is the ability to give himself and up to his charisma modifier and allies advantage on intelligence, wisdom, and charisma saves for 1 minute.
Oh, very nice. Do you already have that Paladin aura that gives the saves to those within 10 feet, or is that yet to come?
That's level 6.
That's level 6, okay.
Yeah,
that's one of the best Paladin abilities right there. That's one thing that Sean, when he was playing Greskin, definitely managed to have intact at all times. I guess having the ability linked to your token makes it a little easier to remember, though.
Right.
Continuing on from the cultist wandering monster encounter, we're inside of these very clean sewers that we kind of joked about the tenets of the evil deities, how cleanliness must be one of the primary tenets of Bane, Baal, and or Mirkul, given the fact that we've got these cultists walking through with braziers of incense, keeping the place, and the floors are swept and mopped and clean. Very awkward and strange place that you wouldn't expect to find, given that it's a sewer. And the next 3 areas that we entered were pretty much uneventful. We found a cold storage locker with some boar carcasses hanging from hooks. We found a dining hall that looked like it was ready for a meal within the next few hours. Adjacent to that was the kitchen. Coal fires were burning, pots were boiling, but nobody was in there. You could see some meat had been chopped up on one of the tables in there. But we spent a good 15 minutes or so just kind of wandering around, exploring, listening to doors, opening. Oh, there's nothing in here. Next one. Oh, nothing in here either.
Well, I mean, and then you were talking about the listening to the doors, and we were talking about the strategy and tactics thing. And I would like to find out what Justin's take was on how a couple of the characters decided that, hey, we're going to send a scout out, and then they're going to shout like 30 feet across in a sewer to echo to be stealthy. And you know what? I have an 8 intelligence, and that's the lowest score that you can get on these particular sets because we used pre-made numbers. So I'm sure that everybody has an 8 intelligence. Almost everybody in our group has like an 8 intelligence. But some of us play like, okay, we're not book smart, but we have some logistics. And some people play like they're as smart as a bag of hair.
Bag of hair, huh?
Well, 2 of you wouldn't know much about that.
Well, like I kind of said in character at the time, my character has experience with like command and having troops under his command and that kind of stuff. So he's used to seeing bad decisions be made. I mean, he's made a few himself. While his intelligence is relatively high with this group, his wisdom isn't it. So he's smart. He doesn't make the best decisions though. So he can understand when somebody makes a mistake. He's made many himself, many that have cost other people their lives. So that one little mistake, he's like, well, that sucks. They know we're here now. They probably already did, though, was his line of thinking. So he was like, he's ready to be like, okay, we tell him that it was wrong. We shouldn't do that again. Learn from your mistakes, and let's move on and do what we need to do. That's the way he looked at it. So if they continue doing really stupid stuff like that, especially if it's something that they've done before, I might have stronger words for them. But as it stands, he's like, yeah, a mistake happened. We'll move past it.
Yeah, and I'm not playing my paladin like, I'm playing my paladin as close to good as possible.
Oh man, that's hilarious, because I was about to interject and I found it humorous that it was the paladin who, after this, as Justin explains it, they made a mistake, we can learn from it, move on, that the paladin's instant reaction is, okay, I might have to kill both these guys after the combat is over.
Because I'm the one who takes all the damage. I'm the one that everything attacks. So it's like, even though we have 2 fighters in the party, most of the time they go after the paladin, which I'd expect, because you've got this, look, I'm in chainmail armor and a shield, and it's like my character is a beacon for damage. And then you've got this fighter who's a half orc, who you really don't want to mess with half orcs anyways. So do you want to mess with Pretty Boy Angel, or do you want to mess with the ugly half orc?
Well, especially when you're in a campaign that's largely dealing with devils and fiends and cultists.
Oh my!
Yes, indeed. Devils and fiends and cultists.
Oh my!
Of course, their natural inclination when they see a group with 2 Aasimars enter. That's why you and Ben keep coming under such constant assault in almost every combat we've had, especially over the last three sessions. Just given who we've been fighting against.
Right. And as the game goes on, I mean, I'm pretty sure, again, Avernus, hello, I'm sure that the targets will be the 2 angels.
Very, very possible. It would be, it's going to take a lot of teamwork and reliance on healing, I think, to assure that both Aasimars see the entire campaign through, because like you're talking about beacons, and we're going into the first layer of the 9 hells, it's not going to be a pleasant experience for the Aasimars.
That's one of the reasons why I chose the Divine Soul Sorcerer pass, so that I could have healing as well.
Yes, great addition.
If we can, and it's not the players, but if we could get the characters, because the 2 players that are playing them are smart guys. I mean, they're both really, really smart. And James, he's really good at tactics outside of, playing this character. So, I mean, he's doing a great 180 on his normal ability.
Oh, but for sure.
If we could get them to understand, it's like, look, the 2 of us walk into a room, things are coming at us, go around the back of them, get a flanking position, and we know where the attacks are going.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I will give to Jim, in that I've seen in every character he's played in, I want to say going on 3-4 years now as part of RPU, is for him it is always character first. Even with his first character, Rock, the barbarian who, man, by the time we finished that campaign, you joined in at the end of that campaign, Don, and you saw Rock was rocking like 250 hit points. He had an ability that would restore half of his hit points. He had resistance to almost everything that I could do to him. So there were a couple of occasions where I feel like I spent the entire session just hammering away at Rock, finally getting him down to nothing, and then he would heal himself back up to 50%. But he wasn't always about the combat and the hack and slash. Like, he spent so much time just developing the mannerisms of the character, which is a very difficult thing to do through text, or it's a very easy thing depending on what your inclination leans towards. I tend to think it's an easier method of expression than verbal like we're doing here. Jim, I think, works well on both accounts as far as actually role-playing through voice and through text. I've been very impressed with all his characters thus far. The Alchemist as well. That was a very interesting character that we had in the last Enemir campaign.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't a super powerful character, but it had enough tricks in there, and it was easy to underestimate. When we had that tournament and Denshar just walked away from fighting the Alchemist because there was really no way for me to get to him. All the little tricks and tactics he could pull out.
Oh, for sure. And just as you're talking about James in that respect, how he's very tactically minded, Jim is very much in that same vein when he wants to be. I mean, he can play all aspects of the character, from the role play to the tactics to the mechanical to just playing innate intelligence as the dumbest possible aspect of the character that you could imagine. And we kind of already talked about it a little bit as far as Jong-hoon and Grulok spoiling the surprise as we entered the next area of this dungeon, which was the Temple of Zariel, which is a name that we're going to be hearing a lot more as the campaign starts getting deeper into it over the next few sessions. But we saw these iron double doors. We knew there was something special about them. There was infernal script across the top that said something about that which falls can rise again. And it was outside of this door that we've got Grulok standing there with the party, and we've got Jong-hoon like 50 feet away around a corner, just kind of peering, making sure there's no wandering cultists about to come surprise our entry to the temple area. And the two of them start shouting, "You see anything? Everything clear over there?" And Jong-hoon's response is, "Stop shouting. We're supposed to be quiet." And he's shouting in response. And of course, the barbed devil and the four cultists that were inside the temple had a moment to prepare for your entry. So when you did open the doors,
I got blasted with everything.
Oh yeah, you got hacked by two scimitars. The demon, or the devil in the back, threw two balls of flame at your character, hit you both times, I think, and once again your character's hit point bar was flashing, and Ben was already strategizing for his next turn. Okay, my bonus action is going to be to heal Selethiel again, and we entered the temple area and faced off against the cultists. Some of the characters kind of moved deeper in almost from the get-go just to challenge this devil up in melee. An important distinction in Dungeons & Dragons, demons and devils. To get up in the face of this devil, and Grulok, Selethiel, and Kalidor were the first three to get up in this devil's face. Kalidor, as usual, accompanied by his spiritual blade, and Grulok, after his first attack, was a miss by several points. I just thought it was a cool effect based off of his positioning next to the angelic statue that was inside of this temple, that he basically chipped away a part of the statue in his missed attack. And that resulted in, I should mention that when we see this statue, it's got hollowed eyes that are glowing. And as James, as Grulok, hacks away a part of this statue at the shoulders and the head, we can see now the source of what is glowing inside the statue. It's not until after we've slain the cultists and the barbed devil, who is now furious with Grulok for desecrating the statue of Zariel. After we've slain the cultists and sent the devil screaming back into hell, we finish hacking away at the statue and discover our first magical weapon of the campaign, which is this glowing mace +1. And Celefio was very interested in that right from the get-go.
Well, actually, second magic weapon. The first one was the flail with the skull, but it was purely evil. And that one, at the end of that segment, I took to the priests of Tyr to have them destroy it.
Very true, very true.
But yeah, that mace, I mean, it's a glowing weapon, so it immediately caught, Celestial's eye of it being a magic weapon. Doing a little bit of mental calculation there, Grulok uses two-handed weapons, which is what he's proficient in. Our cleric uses a sword, but he also rushes into combat and uses a bunch of spells and everything like that. So by having the
Right.
magic weapon in his hands, it's not going to be used as effectively. Nadir, he's not going to be using a magic weapon. He's not going to get up close on there. The monk isn't going to do it. The ranger may or may not want this weapon, but at that point it was like the only reasonable choice was for me to take that weapon.
Yeah, there was some interesting RP there as well, as we started to kind of piece together, well, why is this mace inside of this statue? If it's a magic mace, why not have it out and use it? Perhaps this is a cursed weapon that these cultists couldn't destroy or dispose of in some other way, so this was their way of hiding it, or at least getting rid of it.
Well, the other aspect is because it was glowing and because it was a magic weapon, the devil would not want any of the cultists to have it because they could turn on him at any moment, and that would be the only thing that would do full damage to him. So you don't want to give your
Right.
friends, especially if you're evil, you're always thinking that everybody around you is going to try to kill you at any moment anyways. So you don't even want your friends to have the ability to hurt you.
Very true, very true. That's actually a line from one of the best novels on a complete tangent, just because you reminded me of it, Star Wars Episode 3, when Obi-Wan gets his hands on one of the Magna Guard's staffs and he smacks Grievous with it, and Grievous's response is, "You fool, do you think I would arm my guards with weapons that could hurt me?" Just like, that's so freaking true. That's exactly how it would be. I mean, the masters do not trust the minions because the minions are ever trying to supplant.
Mm-hmm. I mean, just imagine if one of the minions got it into his head that, hey, I can raise up the ranks by getting rid of, this devil who's standing in my way of moving up the ranks.
Oh,
Almost
for
like the
sure.
way of the Sith.
And that's it's the way of the devils too. I mean, as we explore more of that, depending on our character's knowledge and exposure, I mean, out of game, most of us are pretty familiar that that's exactly how the devil hierarchy functions. Is you start off as the sloth, like Lemure, I think it's called, or is there one even below that maybe? And you got to work your way up, and until you're at the top where you're ruling one of the levels of hell, you can always be demoted by the guy above you, so you could still make it up to pit fiend status. And they're just like, nah, I'm sorry, you're done. You pissed me off.
Or one of your underlings could be like, hey, I want your spot stabbed dead, and because I killed you, I now get your spot.
Right. Yep. Or that as well. Yep. I wanted to get... Oh, go ahead.
It's kind of a tangent, but I think it's a good visualizer if you've ever played Shadows of Mordor and the enemy ranking system for the orcs, how they did that. That's actually pretty accurate.
Yeah, that's a pretty cool game. I wanted to get your impressions as well, Justin, and just kind of have you give our viewers a little foreshadowing as well. I gave some information about Zariel before the campaign started. Additionally, you are a masterful GM in your own right, and I know you're very attuned to the Forgotten Realms setting, so you're well aware of who Zariel is, first layer of the Nine Hells and all that. And you brought it up in the context of the game, which got our characters starting to roll religion checks, arcana checks, just to see what knowledge we could dredge up about this devil. And we've not been able to really piece anything together yet in the campaign, but out of game, I just kind of wanted to get your impressions on what we're in for.
Well, I mean, I know that Zariel is a fallen angel, I believe a Solar, or even higher than that went into hell to do, fuck some shit up, and became Lord of the First Layer. I don't remember who the Lord of the First Layer was before her, but they got kicked out, apparently, as, I think it was Asmodeus himself who basically made her that, gave her that power, so he can do whatever he wants in hell. It's his plane. And with the what falls can rise again little message we found, I have a feeling we might have the opportunity to redeem Zariel the Angel in some way, shape, or form. Because
Interesting.
That's a pretty big little statement to have right there in the beginning of the module before we even hit hell. And it kind of worries me that we might actually meet Zariel, the devil lord of the First Layer of hell, because that's kind of powerful. But hey, we'll see what happens, I guess. And it should be fun, right?
Well, you guys have reached level 4, so you're capable of entering the layers of hell now and facing off against greater devils and demons and all kinds of nasty stuff now. This is the level that you should be able to take on all things.
I don't know. I think level 5 is a much better plateau for a lot of this. Myself and Grulak will both get 2 attacks per round. I'm not sure if the Rangers progression is the same, if they get 2 attacks per round, because I never really look at Rangers, because Rangers usually suck. But it's one of those things where I get also my favorite spell coming up, which is not a combat spell, but it's makes the Paladin, the Find Steed spell.
It would be.
I don't know want to know what kind of steed you're gonna find in hell.
Well, the good news is that it doesn't find the steed itself. It summons it, and so it magically summons it. Therefore, it could be a celestial warhorse. It doesn't have to be whatever's native of that plane, or.
Oh, so you're gonna make yourself even a bigger target then? Look at me and my celestial warhorse.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, just hopefully the regional effects of the plane of existence for Avernus don't impose any kind of restrictions in that regard, because we haven't even tried to cross that bridge yet.
Right.
So we finished off the devil. We found the magic weapon. We cleared out the temple. There were some tapestries, 9 tapestries in fact. The number 9 was very prevalent throughout all of this dungeon. We kept finding iron candlesticks with 9 candles atop them. Grulak, James kept making a game out of charging unintentionally through them as he would weave his way through the melee. And it was after this combat, after we tore these tapestries down, that Jong-hoon and Kalidor began just passively spotting secret doors left and right. Kalidor found 3 of them, Jong-hoon found 1 of them. The one that Jong-hoon found was actually an escape tunnel that led up a ladder to a hatch that led into the stables. And Celestial actually took that trip just to kind of investigate that, and we learned that, oh, okay, so had we explored the entirety of the villa and gone into the stables and explored it enough, we might have found another way into the dungeon rather than going into the villa itself. inside the villa was pretty uneventful as it was. We did gain slobber chops out of it at least, so perhaps it was the correct path to take. The secret doors that Calidor spotted, the first of which led into a secret shrine in the Temple of Zariel, where we found Duke Thalamra Venthamper. And right from the get-go, she was very well aware that her moments on this plane were numbered. She had maybe 30 seconds left to live. I don't even think she made it that long. Might have been 18 seconds by the 6-second round format of D&D. And despite the fact that our characters were unanimous in, we're not going to kill her, we're going to do as much non-lethal damage as we can, and using the mechanics as written, once we get the final strike on her, we're going to knock her out. And her final words, "See you in hell," she died anyway, even though Grulok smacked her with the flat of his blade. So our characters kind of also did some puzzle piecing in that respect as well, where we realized, just like, why would the mace have been in the statue? Well, there must have been some kind of devilish pact that she had, where she was just kind of like Obi-Wan when he sacrificed himself to Darth Vader. He's just like, well, I don't care if Darth Vader's going to try to knock me out with this lightsaber blow through the neck. I'm going to sacrifice myself.
Well, and also it could have been, especially when you're dealing with like devils and demons and infernals and things like that, where they could have saw that she failed, and that could have been a punishment, for her to destroy her. So we don't know what her status is going to be, whether she was brought down to hell or whether she was turned into a lemure where she now has to start, just writhing around at the bottom layers of hell, being a little tiny thing. Maybe she thought, hey, I'm a duke, I'm going to go down to hell and I'm going to start ruling, this and that. And the devil's going, no, you're just a little squishy thing now.
Oh yes, you are. You went from 1 of 4 to now 1 of a trillion.
It'll be interesting if she does show up later when we get to hell in some way, shape, or form. It'll be interesting to see that happen.
Yes, indeed. We've already had some indications that that might be the case, given what the Duke said right before she died, and just some of the out-of-game foreshadowing that I've given as some of the devils are whisked and banished from the material plane and sent into hell. Well, we haven't seen the last of them yet. Maybe we'll run into them once we get to Avernus and stuff like that. So that's definitely a possibility.
Our biggest challenge right now is what to do with her son.
Yeah, for sure. There was talk of letting him go. We decided to hold on to him just for a while longer. I'm not entirely sure what the party's intention is with the favored son of the Duke. But at this point, we're going to be entering our 4th session next week with him in captivity.
My character, again, being a paladin and lawful good and everything like that, I wouldn't support any idea that would murder the son, especially since he is defenseless and completely unarmed. And it is one of those things. Now, if he breaks free, grabs a weapon, he's pretty fair game. But at this point, we've got him to the point of there's not much he could do.
Well, fortunately for the party, you're the person who is against killing him. Whereas in our last campaign, you would have been the character most likely proposing that, well, why don't we just kill him? It'd be the easiest solution.
Well, that was an assassin, a Tabaxi assassin monk versus a paladin. So, I mean, it's going from one extreme to another.
Right.
Yeah, complete 180.
And while I might not be lawful good, I am chaotic good. So I don't want to kill an unarmed person, helpless person either.
Yeah, I think our group's pretty heroic.
Yeah, and intelligence of how the law will play into what we've done here. Being chaotic, I'm not concerned of it because of that. I'm concerned because it might come and bite us in the ass type thing.
Very possible. Very possible. And
I mean, yeah, if I was still playing Denchar, his death would be necessary because he's a witness to what we did.
oh man, and then the party would be fighting among itself as some of them would not quite agree with that, but there would still be too much neutrality in the party for anybody to do much of anything about it. Just be like, it happened. Stuff happens. What you gonna do?
And basically, Denchar would have been like, you know what? I think he needs to relieve himself. So I'll walk with him over to here while he. Oh, he didn't make it.
Oh, he fell down an elevator shaft onto some
Yep,
bullets.
onto some bullets.
So we continued through the dungeon after finishing off the Duke, deciding to keep her favorite son Amric in captivity, and we proceeded to explore a couple more secret areas, one of which led us back into the sewer tunnels themselves, and we kind of did an about face just to make sure we didn't leave any unexplored areas behind us. And it was in that trek that the party discovered the cultists' living quarters, where at the time there could have potentially been as many as 10 of them in the quarters when you walked in there, but due to the wandering monster encounters, we had 2 of them, one of which right when you entered the sewer tunnels, and just waylaid these 2 cultists before they had a chance to respond. And then the other wandering monster encounter that started off this session that we're talking about right now, where they interrupted your short rest. Now we're facing 6 of them inside the cultist room, and even still, given that we're facing even numbers, the history of how the dice have not played into the character's favor during this campaign definitely had me thinking, man, this might be rough. I might have needed to have forced an additional wandering monster encounter with 2 cultists, just anywhere between there and here, just to make this combat more feasible so we don't have a potential party member death. And boy, oh boy, how wrong was I, as for the 3rd time in this session, the cultists proved that the CR balance is vastly swinging to the opposite side of the pendulum, and I don't think any of them got a successful attack off. If they did, it was for like 2 or 3 points of damage, and one of them was asleep when you entered the quarters. He woke up, stood up out of his bed, and as he got off of his bed, Jong Hoon had already made his way around the room and was now standing on his bed, beating him down to death. So, yeah, these cultists did not stand a chance.
Well, yeah, I mean, I was the first one in the initiative. Through the open door, I rolled a crit on my firebolt to blast dude in the face.
And then, I mean, when Jean Hoon went in there, and then then all the cultists went. It was like, okay, now Jean Hoon is surrounded, but they couldn't hit him because the dice swung in our favor, and we were able to put ourselves into advantage positions, so it made it almost impossible for us to miss.
Yeah, for sure. At this level, and especially when we're dealing with areas that are a bit more spacious, having that tactical movement, being able to gain flank advantage, is just kind of a state of affairs now, given our experience in D&D and the group that we have in-game as well. Because I know that was an issue in the first dungeon, when we went into the Dungeon of the Dead 3, and we found that, man, what was it? The 15-foot by 10-foot room that had 5 zombies inside of it. So it was, okay, well, there's room for one of us in there. And of course, whoever got the initiative and had an inclination to get into melee was going to take that spot, which left everybody else who was in melee just saying, well, I hope things kind of spill out into the hallway at some point. So it has been, I know, refreshing for a lot of the characters to have the the space open up a little bit, and hey, now we can move over here and get some flank and take more tactical advantage. In one instance, I know where we had a table or some crates in a room where Justin was just taking cover behind it because he ain't trying to get in any kind of melee, given the first 2 or 3 sessions where he was playing the role of Celestial at that point, where he just kept getting rendered unconscious, and it was Dawn and Ben. Well, I guess the sorcerer needs healing again.
Well, also too is that kind of combat prompted, Ben and myself to purchase halberds to give us a little bit of a reach for those situations where we can't move all the way up into combat. So now if someone is standing in front of us, we do have a reach weapon to be able to hit them with.
For sure. And then Kyla's also become very in tune with her character as she realizes, hey, the Bugbear 5-foot reach extension is a huge help. Especially if we continue to encounter confined combat areas. Now we have 2 characters with reach weapons, 1 character who has a natural reach. So it's really only James who always needs to be up in the front, if it comes down to it.
Jong Hoon kind of, but he's got some ranged options now too.
Yeah, I mean, he can throw some darts when it comes down to it, but that's definitely a step down in damage for him.
He's got that elemental stuff now too.
Oh, very interesting. Yeah, we did. I think we did see one example of that in the most recent session. And
so what type of fighter is he playing?
What type of fighter?
Yeah, what type of fighter is James playing? What's his 3rd level?
We'd have to ask him. I do not know off the top of my head exactly which class, which subclass he has decided to go with.
Okay, because he does have that elemental aspect now, so it had to be something within that subclass to start proccing that elemental.
Well, no, I was talking about Jong Hoon.
That's Jim.
Oh,
he's got the way of the elements.
Yeah.
Jim, James. I mean, it's
Justin. John.
Although you did bring up a good question, nobody knows what James has going on with his fighter path.
Yeah, for sure. I'll definitely have to take a look over his character over this coming week now that everybody's leveled up. I want to get a good look at all the new additions so I know what I'm in for with the monsters up ahead. And the trend with the cultists' ineptitude continued into the next chamber, even though the noise that you made breaking into the cultists' living area, slaying all of them, the noise that was made alerted the 2 cult fanatics, i.e. cult leaders, that were in the next chamber. So they had a good round to prepare, and they cast their spiritual weapon spells, effectively doubling their combat output for whenever this door opened. And I knew that these cult fanatics were not likely to be dropped in one hit. They had a decent amount of hit points each. Their attack bonus was pretty good, but the dice were definitely not in my favor on this evening, or with the cultists. The Barb Devil did pretty well, but I think he just naturally had bonuses that made it that way. I didn't really need to have good dice rolls. But the cult fanatics were slain pretty quickly. I want to say that was a 2-round battle. And we ended our session in much the same manner as the previous one, where some of our resources were depleted, some of us didn't have any HP healing options, so we opted for another short rest at about 2 p.m. in this particular adventuring day. Unlike the previous session, we did not have a wandering monster encounter, so we actually managed to just quickly get our hour of rest, restore some hit points, regain some abilities, and prepare ourselves for next Tuesday.
well, also rushing into that. I didn't know if you noticed at that point, but rushing into that room when I was attacking that fanatic, I had 2 hit points left.
Yeah, very true. I noticed your hit point bar was constantly sitting between like 3 and 14 for most of the session. I think there were a couple times after both short rests, you were pretty much back up to full. but as soon as the first round of the next combat happened, your hit points were just, nope, sorry.
Yep, lost about a half my hit points in that first combat because of the lack of surprise.
Yes, but you're the paladin. You're supposed.
Uh-oh.
Watching
like
Justin, he's over there.
Yeah, we lost you there. You're the paladin. You're supposed to what?
Oh, did I freeze up on you? Sorry.
You did, yeah.
I said, well, you're the paladin. You're supposed to get up front and take the hits for us, right?
Which is why I'm going to be, you know, depending on how much money we can scrape together, is I'm going to get my first set of plate mail armor coming soon.
I asked the same question of Dawn and James last week during the RPU OOC. Just their general impressions of this campaign thus far. We're now 8 sessions in. We've had an opportunity to explore multiple areas of Baldur's Gate, bathhouses, dungeons, old ships converted into taverns, and we have a good deal of foreshadowing of what's in store. We have the entire time, given the name of the campaign. And same question of you, Justin, just to kind of wrap up this part of the RPU OOC tonight, is your general impression, and I know you've played a few different 5e mods before, so in general scale too, how does this one compare to some of the other ones?
Well, I would say, I mean, being a fan of Forgotten Realms, I love the setting that they've been putting up at Baldur's Gate City, all the backgrounds that anybody who knows the histories of the deities and stuff like that. So it's been pretty fun to explore all the little places and stuff that they have in Baldur's Gate that they've fleshed out for this adventure. The other thing that's been interesting about this one, at least up to this point, I mean, we haven't obviously gotten into hell yet to see what kind of thing's going to happen at that point, but at this point, it's kind of a mystery type thing. Like, okay, what happened to the other city? Is that going to happen here?
Right.
There's rioting in the streets. We're conscripted to deal with these rioters, but we don't want to be these jackbooted thugs that everybody else who's in the Flaming Fist seems to be. So we're like, oh crap, we don't want to have to do this. So we're like, okay, we'll do the job of taking on these evil cultists. That's great. Yeah, we'll do that. That's something we can do. That's easy. But it wasn't easy because now it's the mayor of the city who's in charge of this, and we're like, we can't just like go banging down her door and say you're under arrest because it doesn't work that way. Well, crap. Now we're got to deal with this kind of ethical quandary as well, and it's just it's always cool when they can kind of throw in these gray areas where it's not just like, you're the good guys, those are the monsters, go get them, blah, blah, blah. So that has been a little interesting. It sometimes can lead to a little bit of player paralysis, though, as they're like, well, shit, I don't want to have to go do that because it'll fuck everything up. And you're like, well, if you don't go do that, the game's over because you have to go do that. And so in some ways, it almost feels like they're forcing you to do bad things to get to do the right thing, and it sucks, especially for people that have classes that are based on being good, like a paladin, for instance. I think as far as the combats and the difficulty of those combats, if it wasn't for the dice rolls that were just horrible for us in the first few combats we had, I think it would have been really well balanced. It has seemed like the opponents we've faced with the abilities we have, it's been a pretty balanced encounter structure. It's just the dice giveth and the dice taketh away. As we noticed, obviously, last game, we did very well with the dice and just wiped the floor with most of our enemies. Whereas in those first couple games, the dice were not on our side. We got wiped. So it's been it's still early to really get a really good impression, especially since we haven't reached hell yet, and that's the whole point of this module. So it'll be really interesting once we get down there and see what kind of stuff is expected of us and what It's kind of stuff they're gonna throw at us.
Indeed. How do you like it, at least in comparison to Storm King's Thunder? We played that one together, I want to say, like 4 years ago. That was a much different feel to the campaign, but I like that part of what 5e is doing with a lot of these modules is they're interconnecting the stories as well. So if you played the Horde of Tiamat, you hear about her stolen treasure and how some of that has made its way here to Baldur's Gate as part of the noble family Dead 3 cultist treasure that you guys have come across. And now you've also found cultists of Tiamat who seem to be intent on getting this stuff back. But just back to the original question as far as Storm King's Thunder, Baldur's Gate, general comparison in that.
It's interesting. Obviously, we went through the whole module of Storm King's Thunder, so I have a bigger understanding of that module. That one gave you a lot of choices to make. Like, do we go after this one? Do we go that way? Do we go that way? And that really helps define how that module went. If you'd gone over and gone for the fire giants, it would have probably gone a completely different way. Eventually, you always end up in the storm giant area, but the way you get there and the things you do to get there are going to be different depending on which choice you make.
For sure.
And like you had mentioned during the game, you're not going to talk your way out of this one. The characters we had for that campaign were pretty unique, I think. I mean, just my druid having the shape-changing abilities he had and able to easily scout almost every dungeon we went into because of it really made a huge difference.
Oh my goodness, yeah. I remember right from the first combat when you entered the city under occupation, and the whole nature of the module is once the characters get into the city, the orcs come charging out of the forest, and before the characters know it, the city is surrounded by orcs. And as soon as I start describing that narrative, Justin's response, and he's playing in Aarakocra, he says, well, how come I didn't see them coming out of the forest? I'm flying up above the city. How did I not see them? Oh. Okay, so rather than the orcs surrounding the city, you now see them charging out of the woods, and we managed to pick them off well before they even got across the moat.
Yeah, the power of flight early in the game is a big deal, and my character in this game actually has that because he's a winged tiefling. He doesn't have his spell-like abilities, he has wings instead. Hasn't really come up yet because we've been kind of underground in the city, so it hasn't been as big of a deal yet. But yeah, that ability to scout in shape-change form and by natural flight was a huge advantage in that previous campaign. In this one, we have a very different set of characters, a lot of combat focused and melee combat focused characters, and because of the righteousness, if you will, of our mindsets, I think, with the cleric, the paladin, my character, even the ranger, and probably in some regards the monk. I'm not too sure about James's fighter, but because of the moral stance that a lot of these characters have, I have a feeling it's going to make this module a lot harder than it might otherwise be if you were morally willing to make ambiguous choices amongst the devils, I think.
Right. I dig it, brother. That's a good perspective on both of those campaigns, and appreciate your comments there in that respect. And for both of you, I'd like to thank you both for being here tonight as part of RPU OOC, recollecting our top moments of this most recent session of Baldur's Gate Descent into Avernus. I'm going to send us over to an intermission screen here, just for a brief moment, and when we return, we're going to have a special guest seer from the Chronicles of the Enemir Historia joining us. In addition, I'm going to give you all some information here about the first part of the Enemir Historia, which, if we've not detailed that specifically, is simply Enemir slang for the 1400-year chronology that is Enemir up to this point in time. So thank you again, Evil Dawn and Justin, for joining in tonight, and we'll send it over to the intermission here and catch up in just a few minutes.
Glad I could make it.
back, welcome back. We are here again, RPU. Don't know if it's really appropriate to call it out of character, since I'm obviously some kind of character right now. But we are going to begin the narration of our Enemir Historia here. I've got a little something different here for our central section of the map instead of the slideshow. Let's see how this looks. Voila! And there we have the map of Alaram, the primary continent of Enemir. Very difficult to see much of anything other than it is a map at this distance, but I will try to stream in a little closer during certain parts of the narration here. So, here we go with the Enemir Historia. This is following the Eucorian calendar, which is our centralmost country on the continent, right here in the center. Which that's even a bit distant to see. So, zoom in. The realms of Eucor, you can see right there, our centralmost kingdom on the continent of Alaram. Major events that all people of Enemir accept as historical facts, as well as other more obscure chronologies, are detailed within this Historia. But this is by no means a complete history of Alaram. Originally written by the scholar Fer Dutas, that's me, of the Elrioth Bardic College of Seaview and published in the year 1220, it has since been updated with scroll works located by the Agents of Destiny within the ancient Kar Amethystine Valley that detail previously untold tales of the Elder Days. Curiously, it has been claimed that the scribe of these ancient works, a dragonborn named Vasselmut, has visited numerous sages and scholars in recent decades since his death in the year 1206. The ghostly visage or disembodied voice adding new details to these historical works through proxies. Additions by scholars who claim to have seen or heard from Vasselmut directly are frequently contested among some historians who debate that these additions should not be added to the official text due to their source. Just as many sages, however, argue that Vasselmut is an eternal seer, and as such will continue to make his marks on the Historia. Further still, the very existence of Vasselmut is contested just as hotly. Moving to the Elder Days, ancient legend holds that humankind originated from the lands now known as Taul. And just a brief pause here while we zoom in on Taul, which is our northwestern area here. This is a more current map, so bear in mind 1400 years ago it was not the Dominion of Taul, it was not Taul at all, but these are the lands that are being discussed at this current point in time. Additionally, I have a separate map here that was constructed for the campaign that I'm about to go over at this point. You can see it is snowing on this map. That is because at the conclusion of this particular campaign, Enemir was currently going through an ice age. Ancient legend holds that humankind originated from the lands now known as Taul. In the early days of humans, the world was already occupied by elves, dwarves, gnomes, halflings, and Melima. According to halfling lore, their kind would be first to come into contact with humans, an encounter that did not end amicably as the barbaric humans are recorded as having attempted to eat their new friends. Some time would pass before humans evolved from their barbarism and the elves would make contact. According to elven history, this early meeting would end with the elves guiding mass numbers of humans from the cold, harsh terrain of the northwest and delivering them to more suitable climates in the lands now known as Ukor. And you can see there how the Ice Age plays into a bit of the Historia that we're talking about there. Back to the Historia we have here in these new lands. These humans who had followed the elves quickly matured and learned new skills from their mentors. Their lifespans increased in the more hospitable lands, and they made friends with not only elves, but also with dwarves, who taught them the ways of the earth, of mining, and crafting marvelous works. The Melima and gnomes have little to say about the early days of humans, the gnomes simply saying that they were sitting those days out, and the Melima having lost all records of that era. It is unknown why and when the elves chose to remove themselves and their influence from the humans, but what little can be gleaned from legend is that those were tumultuous days, dark and terrible, and no lands were safe. Humans often speculate that the elves left them to defend their own lands. But if the reason were so simple, why is there, to this day, such animosity on the part of elves towards humans? One thing is known. Even with the departure of the elves and dwarves from their lands, in the early days of humankind, humans thrived. Sages familiar with elven lore have put forth the theory that the elves grew alarmed at the rapid expansion of mankind, but being apt to peace, they simply accepted the new way of things, that humans would have dominion of the world, though not without considerable lasting resentment on the elven side. Here is what I have managed to compile regarding notable events in human history, beginning with the founding of the Ukorian Empire. It is my hope that these stories and notes are helpful to you in understanding where we have come from, and give guidance to where we are going. Fertutas, 7th of Onar, year 1220. Now, brief out of character tangent here. This is where the Historia used to move directly into year 1 and continuing from there to the histories that get us to our very first Animir campaigns, which that's not until 1130, 1120, something like that. But similarly to how Rogue One, the Star Wars movie, was constructed entirely from the opening crawl of the episode 4 from Star Wars, I kind of was inspired in that same context to take this opening narrative from the Animir Historia and turn it into a complete story that detailed the early days of humankind, of elvenkind, of all the races. And it turned out to be a really cool and fun experience. Additionally, it kind of served as a rehashing of a classic campaign that I had run twice before, as I discussed last week when I talked about how I initially had created Homeland and ran these 2 campaigns on it, and just kind of grew bored with the confinement of what Homeland felt like, so Animir was created, a much more expansive project that allowed more room for adventure and unlimited opportunities. And after almost 20 years of running Animir, those old Homeland juices started flowing again, and trying to rehash that story, it kind of made its way into the Animir Historia as the origin story that is called Pinnacle. And it is that tale that we're going to hear next, told from none other than the Dragonborn sage who chronicled this section that we've already learned a bit about, Vasselmut. And I will turn it over to you now, my friend.
The First Days. Pinnacle. My part in these tales is no small one, but it is by no means my story alone. I am the son of Mother Aquilara and the elder dragon Sarnassus, one of the Aquilara, master of the Hearthfire, a servant of Enimir's first divine power. I am a dragonborn, and my kind arrived first to this world before the likes of dwarves, elves, gnomes, and men. My records are the first written histories, but many centuries passed before my chronologies began. Within the halls of the Oculara, with my golden pen, I chronicled these first stories of Enemir. In the Kar Armithine Valley, I was present when the race of goblins, long thought to be extinct, made war upon the settlements of Newson, Fessinger, and Castle Imdal, and it was during the war that I came to accompany the legendary heroes Phineas, Winsil, Wilton, Vondel, Zadrock, Essie, and Sarnia as we restored order to the valley. My own order was responsible for having riled up the goblins, the Oculus Mephirisin and Ocula Costaros using their powers to overrun the settlements and begin the process of transforming the residents into zombies, which in those days we called incarnates. Having expended the goblins to their intent, the two traitors to the faith also began slaying and reviving the goblins as incarnates, increasing the size of their undead army. It is a long and hard-fought campaign of battles. My friends and I allied with the remaining goblins, reclaimed the halls of the Oculara and the townships, and defended the castle against an assault from Mephirisin's undead army. We discovered that the Oculara traitors had become twisted by a dark power named Vornash, and this prompted us to unearth the last of the uncut gems, a primeval stone of great power. Banded together, we defeated Mephirisin and Costaros, destroyed their undead armies, and trapped Vornash within the last of the uncut gems. With this victory, peace was seemingly restored to the valley, and I was to become the new Oculus. But an instability in the Hearthfire, the magical lifeblood of Enemir, led to a series of earthquakes and volcanic eruptions that forced our evacuation of the valley. Some years passed, wherein our nomadic masses came to live in the slave city Ulm. Robbed of our property as well as our dignity, we nonetheless made new friends in Ulrich and Indri, who suffered alongside us under the rule of Lord Kragorum's seemingly endless soldiers of oppression. The faith of the Oculara had long since waned, but my powers as Oculus and mastery of the Hearthfire remained. Similarly, my friends who I had accompanied from the Amistine Valley also had retained the Hearthfire energy within their very blood, the eldritch life energy giving us each unique abilities that would never be seen again. Truly, our kind were the world's first and only legendary heroes. It was in this post-Amistine age that the first Enemir pantheon was formed in the Averni, a group of powerful celestials and dark entities who came to Enemir in physical form to gain the favor of the people in countless ways. Ulm was freed from Kragorum's grasp, and my friends and I later learned that an ancient monster, known as the Tarask, destroyed Kragorum and his tower. We set out in search of the origin points of Enemir, the places where life had literally begun so long ago. Our journeys put us into contact with many of the Averni, ones who would come to be known in the Pantheon as Parador, and Askadil, Baradin, Ashrahi, and all the rest. We also made a new friend in Ismir, an intermediary between the Avarni and Mortalkin. If our ilk were legendary, Ismir was a step above even that, later earning the mantle of demigod and renaming himself Kralun. Our path led us into mortal combat with the Tarask, and we slayed it, burying it within the bowels of the earth. Some of the Averni attempted to use my friends, Ulrich and Wilton, for their own purposes, but none were corrupted more than Indri, who found a benefactor in the Averni named Usoi. Indri came into possession of a statue that he had been commanded to immerse into the Hearthfire at each of the points of origin, an act that brought him and I into many heated conversations, as I had a gut feeling that this Usoi had a devious motive. My suspicions turned out to be correct when, at the final point of origin, Indri's statue manifested a physical presence and revealed itself as Charavar, a much more powerful manifestation of the being we had known as Vornash years earlier. Charavar, also once known as the Father Zay, how many names does one being need, claimed to be Enemir's creator and father of all the Averni, and he deemed Enimir a failed project that was in need of erasure. The Hearthfire is the blood of the Father Zay, and as such, all life is derived from his being. But we, as sentients, have since grown independent of our own accord, and will always defend our right to exist with ferocity, even more so when our collective existence is threatened, as is Charavar's sole purpose. My legendary friends, Enimir's first heroes, conquered Charavar in battle, destroying his physical form, but his dark spirit would remain to trouble later generations. Throughout these years, the northwest regions from whence we hailed experienced an ice age, and following our vanquishing of Charavar, most of my friends would depart these lands for the central lands of Alarim, a land that would become known as Ukor. My friend Sarnia and the elven tribes she hailed from would lead this exodus of humanity, but I would remain behind, returning to the Kar Amistine and the halls of the Arkilara, where my work continues.
That was fantastic, Vasselmut. It is always good to hear from the Eternal Seer, who has chronicled so much of Enimir's works. We have more stories that only the Eternal Seer of Vasselmut has seen in the backdrop of the Enimir Historia, and we will hear more of those tales in the coming weeks as we unveil more and more of the Enimir Historia. I'm going to continue into the official chronology now, beginning at year 1 of the Ukorian Empire, in which the Ukorian Empire is founded, and construction of the capital, Ukor City, right here in the center of the central country. Ukor City is founded. Its first emperor, Magord, leads a society centered on education, culture, and common prosperity for all humankind. Divided into 3 territories, Central Ukor, of which now only the Ukor realms remain, the southern states of Ukor, which we can see in this future map, is now known as the Wastes of Interius, and the Danamar territories, the third expanse of the Ukor realms, this easternmost land right here. So we can see, just here from the overall continent map, the Ukor realms once encompassed this entire southeastern section of Alaram. Starting from the center, originally hailing from the northwest, humankind definitely came a long way in a short time. The beginning of this age sees the rapid advancement of humans from their barbaric days in times past. The first recorded histories of this age detail numerous discoveries that will become milestone achievements for mankind and enable their rapid expansion throughout the continent of Alaram. Within a generation, humanity's numbers increase 6-fold, and new cities are built seemingly every day. By year 34, Ukor City's construction is completed. This thriving metropolis will only grow over the next 1,000 years to become the largest and most impressive city ever built by human hands. Emperor Magord establishes the first throne of Ukor in the city, becoming the first of many leaders of the most recognized human culture in history. The lineage of Ukorian emperors following Magord is non-existent. and no one really knows when the emperorship was altered to a kingship, though most scholars agree it happened sometime during the splintering of the empire. By year 39, the magical barriers are first reported this year. They are immeasurable hazy walls of seemingly crystalline shape that extend infinitely into the sky, and extend along the borders of what will become Alaram's 6 countries, as well as the 20 countries of the southern continent Xianux, and the 3 provinces of Melima, which is an eastern chain of islands from this central continent of Alaram. These barriers quickly become the bane of spellcasters from all walks of life. The barriers prohibit the casting of 2 of the 8 schools of magic within their borders, forcing uncounted thousands of spellcasters to relocate to completely different parts of Alaram just to retain access to their magical abilities. The silver lining of the magical barriers is that, inexplicably, they allow people to return to life after death, sometimes as many as 11 times. This phenomena completely changes the mindset of Enemir's races, as people become much more willing to take risks, and Bloodsport games gain in popularity across the lands in varying waves over the centuries. The adventuring profession becomes much more widespread, with at least half the citizenry claiming to have explored at least a dungeon or 2 in their day. The greatest and wisest scholars and wizards will spend their lives exploring this phenomena for naught, as the nature of this cataclysmic event will never be revealed to most on Enemir. By year 41, the southern states of Eucor finish their capital city of Sartane, which will later be renamed Interi Maltha. We can see here on the southern map, here on this peninsula, the city of Croy Maltha, another slang for Interi Maltha. Just like so many of the great fantasy works out there, we try to have numerous names for the same thing because that's not confusing to the writers. In this year, the Eucorian wizard Ardath and his cleric companion Uthgar slay the mighty dragon Wacerix. Ardath and Uthgar are hailed as heroes across the land, and they are made kings of the southern realms. This will lead to a magocracy-theocracy rule that continues throughout southern Eucor for the next several hundred years. Notably, Uthgar pays homage to the goddess Naya, which will lead to a significant surge of Nine worshippers in the southern lands. By year 55, in the Danamar territories, the great inventor Lestov plans the construction of the capital city of Purani, located here on the northeastern section of the kingdom right there. The great inventor Lestov plans the construction of the capital city and the great temple of Reyna, which we can see located nearby. In addition, he makes a name for himself by inventing the world's first windmill and developing the continent's first wide-scale agriculture. Generously, he passes on use of his techniques to any who travel to the site of the future Danamari capital to learn from him. And lastly, for tonight, in year 67, the Danamar territory's capital city of Purani is constructed in only 12 years, less than half the time it took to construct Eucor City further to the west. Months later, this same year, the great temple of Reyna is completed some miles away, marking Lestov as the world's most accomplished inventor and engineer of the time. Strangely, after Lestov makes an announcement that he has a marvelous new invention in the works, he mysteriously disappears. Stranger is the fact that much of Danimar's early history goes unrecorded from this point or is lost, as with the exception of their later secession from Ukor, little is known of their deeds over the next several hundred years. Surprise! It was me all along! Tragically HP, I'm not really fair to toss. Sometimes I do masquerade as him, usually every other Thursday. But that's a different point. In any case, I had a blast here doing our second episode of Roleplaying Unlimited Out of Character, otherwise RPU00C. It was great to have Evil Dawn with us again for the first part of the session, and Evil Deadpool for the second part here of the Historia. Likewise, Justin, our Tiefling Sorcerer, thank you very much for joining in. Thank you for the perspective. Got a lot of cool information from you as well. And last but not least, John, who played Vasselmuth back in the Enemir Pinnacle campaign and was kind enough to step in tonight to portray the role, just to give the Historia a little bit more flavor. I use little loosely. I think you stole the show tonight, and I've got a lot to live up to in the coming presentations of the Historia. I don't know if this is gonna do it right here, just kind of. So, thank you guys very much for being here tonight. Thank you to our viewers for watching live. Thank you to our followers, to our donators, and we will catch you again this coming Tuesday with another episode of Baldur's Gate: Descent into Avernus. Have a great night, all.